Good afternoon, Lumpo.
Good afternoon, Ajahn.
So it's been some time since we took the time to have a Q&A, so thank you for this. So today is Tuesday, 14th of December 2021. And I'd like to just read you a short quote from the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 29. I'd like to hear your considerations on this. It goes like this. The purpose of the holy life does not consist in acquiring alms, honor, or fame, nor in gaining morality, concentration, or the eye of knowledge. That unshakable deliverance of the heart, that indeed is the object of the holy life. That is its essence. That is its goal.
Well, that's one of the quotes from the scriptures that I really have treasured my whole monastic life, even as a Samanera. I read that in the Jnanatiloka's Word of the Buddha, and it seems so perfectly explained, the aim of the holy life. And that's important reflection for all of us who are living what we call the holy life as samanas, as monks, as nuns, in order to put things into perspective, the kind of experiences that we have as individuals and as a group, as Sangha members, as monks or as nuns, and how these worldly conditions can overwhelm us in our minds and with our ideals, with our own views about the holy life and what's right and what's wrong, where that particular quote explains the aim of the holy life is this unshakable, this unshakableness of the heart, which is a metaphor for enlightenment, where you begin to realize for yourself the unshakable reality of Dhamma yourself. You're no longer just using a quote or believing that it's possible, but actually realizing it. And I've used that a lot during my many years as a bhikkhu, because you go through so many experiences that are very shakable. As a training monk, as a Majjhima monk, as a senior monk, as an abbot of monastery, as a upachaya, a preceptor, or to ordain monks, nuns, and to carry on, in a tradition that's formulated for you, very precise rules about behavior and precepts, and all the doubts that arise in regards to your own interpretations of Dhamma, of Vinaya, and your kind of reactions to others' views and opinions. These are all shakeable, flappable. They flap in your mind, and they can be very different, because we don't always agree on the shakeable conditions that we're experiencing through the senses. And so because we don't agree, we can make these our kind of what we cling to, what we stubbornly hold to and fight over and judge each other by these conditions that we are very attached to, our sense of righteousness or our interpretations of scriptures or our tradition. My view, my opinion, become my standard for operating in the world, and that world is shakeable. It shakes all the time, and we, at this time in history of humanity, the obviousness of shakeability is apparent in just the mass media, and this sense of finding a perfect society, a perfect monastery, a perfect teacher, a perfect system, perfect political system, perfect religious system. These are ideals made out of the human brain. They're not ultimately real. Like, they're not, they're imagined. They're imaginations of perfection. What we think, taking our thinking process to its top point, to its summit, and then we operate and compare life with that. We're always going to be disgruntled or disappointed or complaining, because the worldly life is a very shakeable conditioning, and our cultural conditioning is very shakeable, and our own personality is easily shaken by praise and blame, by success and failure. And and the Buddha in his teachings pointed this out, how the suffering, the First Noble Truth, is about this clinging to conditions that are unsatisfying. And when you reason it out, if you cling to what is unsatisfactory, and you don't realize you're clinging to it, then you're always going to be suffering, because there's always something you don't agree with or don't like or don't approve of about either yourself or the people you live with or the world or the country you're living in. There's so many things we can feel righteous indignation over, and so many injustices and so many abuses of laws and criminality and scams and delusions that are promoted through media. It's endless, the endless parade of shakeable conditions. And so the Buddha, in his teaching was pointing out, you don't try to get rid of the shakeable conditions. It's not about trying to sort it out and find conditions that don't shake, but realizing that all conditions are impermanent. That's their nature, to change. Something can't be permanently good or perfect or beautiful or true. These are adjectives about the best, the superlatives, but they are limited, because their words themselves are conditions. They're shakeable. And so what is it that realize shakeability? And of course that's what awareness is. Conscious awareness is aware of the shakeability of our thoughts, of one's physical body, of one's emotional habits, of one's viewpoints and opinions, conceptions, and so forth. We are encouraged to investigate and to really understand how unsatisfying the world is, because it is always changing, and it's not always changing the way we want it to. So what is the unshakability is this awareness, this mindfulness, that doesn't shake. That can be, in the midst of a battlefield or a storm or a typhoon. Awareness doesn't shake. Your emotions shake all over the place. Imagine in a battlefield or in most situations. And just this present time with the COVID pandemic and the Omicron variant that is promoted by the media, so, this is a very worrisome condition that we hear about, and we take precautions. We wear masks, get vaccinations as a way to try to control it or prevent it from getting the disease. And so, emotionally we feel, what do you actually feel about the pandemic? And we all want it to end. We want to find a solution, And so there's no more pandemic. COVID pandemic would be what everybody wants. Nobody wants a COVID pandemic. But COVID pandemics aren't about what we desire, but it's the way nature changes. So it's part of the natural changingness of phenomena. And phenomena its nature is shakeable or changing or unsatisfactory. And it's not self. So the whole illusion of a separate self that we, the ego, or the Sakya Ditti, the Pali term for the ego, is very shakeable, impermanent, unsatisfied. And, how do you perfect your ego so you have a perfect ego, and all the attempts in modern psychology and science and all kinds of gurus and Ajahns, teachers trying to tell us how to have perfect egos, but egos are conditioned phenomena. They can't be perfect. You can't have a perfect ego because it's a prevarication. It's an artifice that we've acquired through life. But what doesn't shake is what is aware of the ego. And that's awareness, mindfulness, conscious awareness. Dhamma is the Dhamma that doesn't shake. So our refuge in Dhamma is in the unshakability, the unshakable Dhamma, not the Dhammas that arise and cease and change according to conditions we have no control over. So I encourage anyone who's listening to this talk, take this seriously. The unshakable heart is the aim of the holy life, so that the holy life is truly holy. It's not just trying to make worldly conditions better, but it's learning to recognize things as they are and to realize what you're not. You're not anything that shakes. You're not a shaking condition. So can you claim unshakability as a person? No, you can't. Because personality, any thoughts about yourself as a separate person shakes and is not to be trusted. But when we take refuge in Dhamma, that's what actually it means in Dhamma that doesn't shake. We begin to realize that, know that, because it's here and now. It's not something remote and far off and refined and special. It's so ordinary, so real, so true, so perfect that we don't notice it because of our distracting habits with all the shakeable, flappable conditions that we think and feel through our bodies, through our senses.
So in order to take refuge in that unshakability, you need to learn to recognize the conditions that are unstable and also recognize that awareness you're talking about and learn to step back from one back into the other. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's very simple, really. Like Rinpoche, his method was this Puto mantra, which is like the witness position. Like Puto is a mantra type form of Buddha. So it's using the Buddha's name. And not as some kind of worshipping an ancient sage of the past, but as the reality of witnessing Dhamma here and now, because it's Buddha in the traditional Pali explanations, it's Buddha that knows Dhamma. So in Bhutto, you're not egotistically attaching to it. It's merely a skillful means, an expedient means to remind you that's your refuge, is in awareness, witnessing. So we can witness the way things are. And so in Vipassana meditation, the four foundations of mindfulness is all about witnessing the body, the feelings, the emotions, and dhammas that arise and cease. And see them, not in terms of personal liking or disliking or trying to control them, but just this simple relaxed awareness of the way things are is letting like the clouds in the sky flow by without making an emotional problem about black clouds when you don't want them, or you just want pure blue sky all the time. But in terms of the sensory world that we're experiencing through these bodies, we have to deal with happiness and suffering, praise and blame, success and failure, good health, bad health, old age, sickness and death. These are the obvious facts that are flappable and changeable. And so the Buddha is making that very apparent, to be the witness of it. And, I used to ask myself, what doesn't change? What can awareness be impermanent? Can it, is this conscious awareness, this mindfulness of the Bhutto, of the knowing? Is that a condition? Can a condition see itself? Can one condition know another condition? If I depend on one condition, I attach to a condition, and I view everything from whether I like or don't like, approve or disapprove, which is just increasing the sakyaditi, the ego separate self view. Because as a person you form preferences and you form opinions and views. It's part of cultural conditioning, religious conditioning. It's all conditioning, it's all flappable stuff, that we align ourselves with. And no wonder the Buddha pointed to in his first sermon, the noble truth of suffering, because it's so obvious. And yet, how many people, we blame our suffering on other conditions. If all the conditions were perfect, then we wouldn't suffer. We have this view, as a separate individual personality, that if I had the perfect parents, the perfect education, the perfect relationship, living in the perfect society, going to the perfect schools and getting the perfect degrees, having lots of money, that I'd be really happy, perfectly happy. That's the illusion, that's the fairy tale of life that it's been conditioned into us. It's not the way things are. It's not life as it really is. So the Buddha is pointing to the fact that no matter what the conditions might be, good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure, good health or bad health, our true refuge is in awareness of them as anicca, as impermanent, unsatisfying, and not a personal self. So there's no personal self, because the personal self is the ego, the strong identity we have with our physical body, our belief that consciousness is inside our brain or inside the body, and that we're this limited personality, and So because in terms of form, we're all very limited in form. And our senses, how accurate can our senses, respond to reality? So we can create, we have imagination, we can imagine all kinds of things. There's all kinds of fake news and dramas going on, and theories, conspiracy theories that people imagine. You can imagine anything that you want to believe in, but that's not awareness, that's not wisdom. That's not mindfulness, that's just habit patterns that you've developed. And you take sides and you believe in concepts as reality, or you believe in your own opinions as being right. Or you believe other people's opinions are wrong, so it's in terms of belief, it's about believing or disbelieving, it's about the thinking process, about the changing conditions. So to believe in something isn't, is conditioned into us. To believe in democracy or in Buddhism or in Dhamma, belief in Dhamma. But when we take refuge in Dhamma, we're not just believing in it, because what is the Dhamma? For those of us who are culturally conditioned by Buddhism, who come to Buddhism when we're adults, we take refuge in Dhamma. And what is the Dhamma? What are we taking refuge in? And we say, to be a Buddhist, you have to take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And we go through the ceremonies, take the 3 refuges, which are a part of ceremonial forms, especially of our tradition. And but then we, through investigation, what is the Dhamma? And in translations, in English translations of Dhamma, apparent here and now. So, and then, that's a very worthy reflection. And to ask yourself, what is apparent here and now? And of course, what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, feel is all changing. You can experience through the senses, sunny days or rainy days, or feeling healthy and vigorous or sickly and weak. And these are feelings and conditions that arise and cease according to other conditions. But all the time, whatever state the conditions might be that you're experiencing, what is apparent is that you're aware of them. They're like this. And so it's as simple as that, this awareness, awaken attention to the way it is. And then the constant refrain of all conditions are impermanent, all Dhamma is not self. You can't find your sense of separateness and specialness as an ego, as a person, as a physical form. It's always subject to, no matter what you decide you are as a person, as a personality, that can easily change according to whether you're successful or failing, or people love you or people hate you. The whole sense of self flaps about, shakes, and causes us endless fears, worries, and problems about, what's going to happen to me in the future. And what doesn't shake during all these shaking conditions is awareness. So it's learning to abide, to really take refuge, to rest, to abide. It's a place of rest, of being the witness to the changing conditions rather than be a victim of the changing conditions.
If I may ask a question with a bit of more of a personal touch to it, when we're talking, you often mention how much you enjoy just spending time in your room, resting in emptiness. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it? It is this refuge, this unshakable side of awareness.
Yes, it's what I call real bhavana or meditation.
Yeah.
And it's not a technique, that I've learned from it, but just awakening and, apparent here and now, Dhamma, apparent here and now and timeless. I use these references a lot, timelessness. Because every thought is a time-bound condition. Every emotion is a time-bound condition. All your senses are all time-bound conditions. Your body, is all about time. Time is the world that we see, that we hear, smell, taste, touch, that we think. These are the conditions. But the unconditioned is silent. So it's here and now, timeless. And so in just reminding yourself of that, you begin to, you have this sense of letting go, of relaxing. And letting go, then you begin to notice silence. Silence aware of itself. There's awareness. There's knowing, there's no knower. There's no object to know, but there's knowing. Or one of my favorite reflections nowadays is the unknowingness, because knowing doesn't know anything. And it's not like it's taking sides with anything, it's just aware, it's like this. So in this Lumpur Chow would emphasize, or Tanja Kun put a tat, and so he used to use the da, the Pali word for Benyang Nieng, or it's like this. That's knowing, but it's impersonal, it's not me. Ajahn Sumedho knowing something, knowing silence. In the silence there's no Ajahn Sumedho anymore. Ajahn Sumedho has to manifest and disappear. This is just a convention, it's not a reality. So your name, your position, your everything that is personal and separative arises and ceases, and you're aware of it, presence and absence. Usually, out of just the ego tends to want to get rid of the unpleasant and hold on to the pleasant. So we're caught in this endless struggle of trying to make life, to be happy, to be successful, to be appreciated, to be loved, to be acknowledged, and we really resist the tremendous fear of being a failure, of being nobody, of being rejected by society, of being despised, of being accused of things, the ego is based on this kind of structure of success and failure, praise and blame. But this awareness, silence, doesn't have any praise and blame or success or failure. In the silence, there's awareness of it. If suddenly the fear of the future arises, there's awareness. It's like this. It's not judging. It's not saying that's fear of the future. It's not labeling it or approving or disapproving. It's just witnessing its presence and its absence. So, when the ego just knows the presence because you identify with the condition. And then, we aren't aware of the absence. Because the thinking mind is, proliferates. It goes on and on and on. So as long as you're attached to the intellectual capacities of your brain, you're going to just go on and on and on with ideas, with concepts, with beliefs, with systems. And because that's the way the thinking mind operates. It's grammatical, it's conditioned in you, like English grammar. You learn that at a young age, how to combine a noun and a verb and so forth. And it's all conditioning, So, when we're trying to figure out the world and who we are as a person, as a separate member of society, as a bhikkhu or a siladhara or something, our personal identities or our social identities, we end up with just empty phenomena, but we can take it all very seriously. They make endless problems. They make everybody miserable over, that you don't really appreciate me like you should. And you should be grateful. We talk a lot about gratitude. And it's good teaching. We should be grateful. But when we grasp the idea, the teaching itself, we can be tyrants about gratitude. Like parents saying, you should be grateful to me because I took care of you from your birth. And it's true, should be grateful, but then that's not wisdom, that's not witnessing. You're just taking a position and making judgments about somebody else, about how they should be, without knowing what you're doing. You're caught up in righteous views, which are right, but right is also a condition. So getting beyond right and wrong, good and bad, is the unflappable, unshakable heart of Dhamma. That is the whole point of the holy life. And that, keep that as a constant reminder, what for the Sangha here in Amravati, that is your goal, your emphasis, rather than trying to, wanting to become Ajahns or senior monks or senior nuns or bhikkhunis or trying to get prestigious titles or, to acquire degrees in Vipassana and Abhidhamma and all that. That's not the aim of the holy life. That's the ego operating and wanting to get something better than what you have, you assume you have right now. But if you really take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, it's not about becoming anything. It's about letting go of everything. But we have these egos, so, it's not to say we get rid of the ego, but we begin to see that clinging to it is the cause of suffering. So you don't get rid of your ego through awareness. You don't, change your ego in any noticeable way, but you become aware of it as a condition rather than as a personal identity. And that's liberation. So in enlightened awareness, you still function as a member of society, as a monk or a nun, as a citizen, of the country you're living in, and as you still operate with the conventions, in using the personal conventions that we have to use in the world. But the difference between an enlightened being and an unenlightened one is that an unenlightened one believes that they're the ego, that they're somebody special, or they're somebody insignificant, or they're nobody. And they believe that and operate from these kind of positions, which are shakeable. So silence, the background of everything, the substratum, behind all the noise of your thoughts and the power of your emotional habits is the silence that they manifest and disappear. And it's awakening to this silence, because it's here and now. It's not something created or dependent upon conditions being silent. It's not something that you create. Otherwise you couldn't trust it either. But it's the goal of the holy life. So in the long run, you know, like anatta, no self, you know, through investigating Sakya Ditti, Sila Bhatta Paramata, these are the first three fetters, the obstructions to seeing the path of liberation, is this condition, these humanly conditioned habits of a separate self view, identifying with the physical body that you have, and learning to think and being conditioned by your culture, by your social position, by your family, by your tribe, you know, by everything around us. When we aren't aware of it, we become conditioned by it. And it's all about pleasure and pain and beauty and ugliness and right and wrong, you know. You know, in the changing, flappable, conditioned realm, everything is subject to change. Like old age is the result of birth. You know, so something as obvious as that, you know, if you're never born, you never grow old. But, you know, once you're born, a newborn infant, all it can do is get old. And that's just nature of the conditioned realm, which we're conditioned to identify with in a personal way. So, and the thinking process is conditioned, you know, so, you know, my native tongue is English and American English, and it's, I learned to speak it when I was growing up, you know, it's just part of my natural conditioning heritage. And I learned to speak it like this, and you know, that I was educated in the English language, and so it's you know, I think in English, I express my pleasure or pain in English terms. And what is that? What's English? You know, is it ultimate Dhamma? Is it ultimate reality? Or it's just another language that people learn after they're born into an English-speaking family. This is what you pick up. And yet you can, you know, you develop a critical mind, and you have a high IQ, you have a good education, you think a lot. And, you know, as you think a lot, you can become more reasonable. The more kind of rational you become, the more reasonable, sensible you are. But so much of the people are not reasonable and sensible. They think with fear and prejudices and all kinds of biases, not through reason and logic and understanding of things. So we're free thinkers, we're free to think anything we want. And take that as a definition of yourself. I can think anything I want, which is a kind of truism. Because I can do that, I can think anything. And being educated, you learn to think reasonably. And but even that is a limitation, because then you expect everybody to be reasonable when they're not, and you get frustrated and annoyed with politicians and preachers and religious gurus, and just through the conditioning, whatever language is your native tongue, it's an acquired conditioning. You're not born speaking Thai. You're not born speaking English or French or Chinese. You learn that. And if a Chinese is born into an English-speaking family, he speaks English. Because he's conditioned to do that. That's just the way it is. But what is beyond language, what is aware of thought, is conscious awareness. You're aware of what you're thinking is like this. Not judging it, because thinking is about judging. So you think a bad thought, you feel angry and annoyed at somebody, and then you think, I'm a bhikkhu for so many years, I shouldn't be angry and annoyed. Then you're thinking ideally about what an ideal bhikkhu should be like, and you're caught in the feeling guilty and trying to pretend you're not annoyed, or you've conquered it, or there's something, it's a message that you've got to learn how to deal with your annoyance habits, and you create a sense of that you are somebody that always has to make things right or become perfect or criticize or make value judgments about yourself or others. It's an endless cycle, hopeless kind of tedious life that we live. And no wonder people are seeking distractions from it. Like the modern technology is an incredible distraction from the reality of here and now. Because, you've got iPads and you just have little apps on the screen and you just touch them and you can get the news or read a book or read something on it or see videos or get the weather report or, all kinds of possibilities for distraction. So we don't, modern life is stressful because of that, because we're always distracting ourselves with meaningless, empty objects, and we don't know what we're doing. We're not intentionally doing it, we're just habitually doing it. So this awareness of that is not that we don't do that, but we become aware. And so when when you begin to appreciate and recognize silence as your refuge, that's a relief from all that distraction, all that stuff that you acquire through internet, through mass media, through the society you're living in, through the friends you have around you. Silence is universal, it's not personal. It's not something you can you can't identify with it. As soon as you identify with silence, you're thinking again. So, I just, over the years, in recognizing this, I filled notebooks. I've showed you Ajahn notebooks with nothing but silence written on one word after another, learning to use my ability to write silence to remind me, filling out whole pages of notebooks with just the word silence. And just to remind myself, because the habits, my thinking habits were so powerful that I couldn't, I had to constantly kind of remind myself using just the English word silence. Or sometimes I use the Italian silenzio because it's more kind of rhythmic. But whatever, it's Italian or English, it's still an artificial condition that you eventually let go of, because you know silence. Silence is reality here and now. It's not a word. But in learning, when you take your refuge in Dhamma, it's silent. It doesn't have a language. It's not Pali. It's not Sanskrit. It's not Tibetan or Chinese. Those are conditions that arise in the silence. And silence is peaceful, beautiful, perfect. So it's not like dead silence and kind of like you imagine it might be. Because sometimes silence is imagined to be, boring or dead, and so we use words like emptiness, and it sounds barren and meaningless. So the word emptiness is just another word, or silence. And then you find it out for yourself. Once you begin to realize and treasure silence, it's relaxed. All the world ceases in the silence. So and so like in monastic life, you can get very upset when you go to meetings and people say things you don't agree with, and you can personally be offended by various things that happen, but then the silence, it drops away. You're not suppressing it. You're not suppressing emotion, but being annoyed disappears in silence. And so you just let it disappear rather than trying to get rid of it. And so just through your own experiments, your own investigation, you begin to realize this for yourself. Bhajitang Vaitidapo, we need to be realized individually through wisdom, is Dhamma.
Thank you very much for these reflections, Paul.